The story begins inside a crowded apartment complex in China, where a former scientist named Liu lives with his young daughter, Lin. Liu proudly admires a drawing of a corpse flower that Lin made, and after feeding his pet snake, he announces that his research is finally complete and ready for testing. He believes that if the experiment works, it will cure the hereditary skin condition that affects both him and his daughter, giving her a chance at a happier, more confident life. Instead of testing the serum on an animal, Liu makes a reckless choice and applies a piece of treated rat skin directly onto his own face. At first, the results look incredible. The serum regenerates his damaged skin at the cellular level, and the scars on his face start to vanish. Then everything goes wrong. The regenerative cells refuse to stop growing. They spread across his entire face, and because of one fatal miscalculation, the serum distorts and destroys his facial structure, killing him. The experiment was finished, but its legacy was only just beginning. This is grafting. 13 years later, Lin has grown into a brilliant young woman. She still carries the same skin condition, but she excels in school and earns a full scholarship to a university in New Zealand. When she lands at the airport, she is welcomed by her relative, Aunt Xiao, who has lived in New Zealand for years. Xiao tells Lin that her father would have been proud, then takes her home. There, Lin meets her cousin Angela, who looks stylish, modern, and completely different from the life Lin has known. Before showing Lin to her room, Xiao reminds Angela to learn from her cousin and to take her studies as seriously as Lin does. The next morning, Lin prays in front of her late father's altar, then heads to campus. Being new, she gets lost trying to find her classroom. A frightening-looking homeless man named John points her in the right direction, and Lin thanks him before hurrying off. Later, after a written exam, a professor named Paul announces the top 3 scores. A popular student named Jess takes third with 87. A blonde student named Eve comes in second with 92, though something about her score seems suspicious. First place goes to Lin with a perfect 100. The whole class is stunned, and Paul uses the moment to push everyone to work harder. After class, Lin sneaks into the laboratory to continue her father's research. Paul catches her, but instead of making excuses, she shows him her father's research journal and explains that she is trying to finish the work he never completed. Paul cannot read the Chinese notes, but the project fascinates him. Impressed by her intelligence, he makes her his teaching assistant. That night, Angela invites Jess and Eve over for a sleepover. The girls are curious about the altar dedicated to Lin's father, and they are surprised to learn that the marks on Lin's face come from a hereditary condition. Angela takes them to see Lin's room, which unsettles them because it is filled with photographs, medical equipment, and research materials. Eve grows disgusted and suggests they forget about it and watch a movie, even putting on a face mask while they do. Later, Lin appears, and Angela finally introduces her cousin to the others. Trying to fit in, Lin invites Angela and her friends out for lunch and offers to pay for everything. Eve is not interested, but goes along because of Angela. After a few photos, Lin encourages everyone to try what she considers the best dishes at a traditional Chinese restaurant. Jess and Eve, used to Western food, are visibly uncomfortable, and things get worse when Lin happily starts eating chicken feet. Eve pushes to leave, which hurts Lin, and she ends up packing her unfinished meal to take home. Afterward, Lin runs into John and opens up about the marks on her face, admitting she feels people avoid her because they are disgusted by how she looks. John tries to comfort her. Compared to what happened to him, he says her situation is not hopeless. He reveals that he was once the victim of a brutal acid attack by an unknown person who never faced any consequences. Their conversation is cut short when Paul offers Lin a ride home. She is a little embarrassed but accepts, glad to save some money. During the drive, Paul admits he is genuinely interested in her research and offers to help her finish it, which makes her incredibly happy. Back home, Lin hears Angela talking to someone and quietly tries to see what is going on. Angela catches her, snaps at her for spying, and tells her to stop acting so familiar and to stay out of her personal life. The next day, Lin tells Paul they still need one final ingredient to perfect the serum. If they get it right, she believes it could cure everything from minor skin conditions to severe burns without any surgery. Paul agrees and encourages her to keep going, but experiment after experiment ends in failure, and the lack of progress starts to frustrate him. Then one day, Jess approaches Lin and apologizes for how she treated her before. After Paul leaves, Jess offers to walk home with her. Along the way, Jess notices that Lin keeps hiding her face and encourages her to be more confident and to stop covering herself with a scarf all the time. As they talk, Lynn spots a brochure for a corpse flower exhibition, and something clicks. She realizes the final ingredient she has been searching for is the stem of the corpse flower, a plant famous for its powerful odor. That night, determined to finish the work, Lynn breaks into the exhibition like a thief to steal the sample she needs. Back at the lab, she extracts the substance and adds it to her serum. Around the same time, another secret surfaces. Eve has been having an affair with Professor Paul in exchange for better grades. Even while spending time with Eve, Paul becomes concerned when he notices Lynn is still working late in the lab. Meanwhile, Lynn decides to run one final test. To prove the serum works, she cuts a wound into her own thigh and injects the new formula. The results are astonishing, and she realizes her father's serum is finally complete. At the same moment, Paul worries his relationship with Eve might be exposed, so he sends Eve out through a back exit and goes to check on Lynn. Eve is annoyed at being dismissed so suddenly. When Paul arrives, Lynn excitedly shows him her thigh, which has healed almost instantly. Neither of them notices that Eve has secretly photographed the moment. After Lynn leaves, Paul becomes very interested in what her research could mean, and it is clear he is already thinking about using it for himself. Angela is shocked when she receives the photo of Lynn, revealing her healed thigh to Paul. When Lynn gets home, she is horrified to find that Angela has trashed the altar dedicated to her father. Angela accuses her of doing inappropriate things with Paul to earn her perfect grades. The argument turns violent, and in the chaos, Angela is accidentally killed when a chopstick strikes her in the eye. Lynn panics. Knowing Aunt Xiao could be home at any moment, she drags Angela's body into the bathroom and desperately tries to think of a solution. Then a terrifying idea comes to her. Using the regenerative serum she just perfected, she grafts Angela's face onto her own and decides in a single night to take over her cousin's identity. After cleaning up, she hears Xiao arrive. Seeing her daughter nervous and shaken, Xiao assumes Angela is going through a hard breakup and comforts her, completely unaware that the person in front of her is actually Lynn. Elsewhere, Eve's relationship with Paul turns out to be even worse than it looked. She sees him not only at the university but also privately at his home. Eve grows frustrated because Paul seems far more interested in his research than in her, and he makes it clear he does not want her interfering with his work. The next morning, Lynn works on perfecting her disguise. She studies Angela's habits and mannerisms, practicing every detail until she can imitate her convincingly, almost to the point of obsession. Soon Xiao leaves for a week-long business trip, unaware of the tragedy already inside her own home. The following day, Lynn shows up on campus as Angela. People immediately sense something is off. She acts awkward and even struggles to walk in high heels. Then a young man named Josh approaches, wraps his arms around her, and kisses her before she can even process what is happening, leaving her stunned. That afternoon, Lynn finds herself enjoying her new life as Angela, finally hanging out with Jess and Eve and feeling accepted. When Jess steps away for a phone call, Eve notices Angela seems different and gets curious. Lynn brushes it off, claiming she is just trying a new style and embracing her Chinese roots. Lynn grows more comfortable in the role and even starts to enjoy being Angela, especially when she realizes she has a date coming up. Josh arrives to pick her up with no idea that the real Angela's body is still hidden at home, wrapped in plastic. He takes Lynn to a scenic cliffside, and everything seems fine until they start getting closer. Then disaster strikes. The grafted skin of Angela's face begins peeling away from Lynn's own face and falls directly onto Josh. Terrified, he loses his footing and plunges off the cliff to his death. Back home, Lynn panics again when she discovers her father's research journal is missing. She contacts Paul, hoping he knows something. But Paul, who secretly plans to steal the research, pretends he knows nothing. Studying the journal in private, he finds the notes about the corpse flower and becomes convinced the final ingredient is the flower's stem. When he visits the exhibition, the corpse flower has already died, but he cuts away the section he needs anyway, even though the plant has started to rot. Meanwhile, Lynn uses the little serum she has left to reattach Angela's face. Later that night, Lynn sneaks into Paul's office and tears it apart searching for the journal, but finds nothing. Just as she is about to leave, she notices Eve arriving on campus late at night, which makes her suspicious. Acting friendly, Lynn asks Eve for a ride home. During the drive, she studies Eve's flawless skin and beautiful face, and a disturbing idea starts forming in her mind. By the time they arrive, Lynn has already made her decision. She casually invites Eve to spend the next night at her house. Unaware of the danger, Eve accepts. The following night, Lynn lures Eve into her room, claiming she has something to show her. The situation feels suspicious, but Eve goes along with it, until the moment she realizes Lynn intends to kill her. Eve turns and runs, and Lynn calmly follows behind, showing almost no emotion. Eve hides for a while and eventually slips into a small pool, holding her breath underwater to avoid detection. But it does not work. Lynn finds her and brutally murders her on the spot. Examining Eve's smooth, flawless skin, Lynn comes up with another horrifying plan. This time she intends to use Eve's identity to get into Paul's home and recover the missing journal. She removes Angela's decomposing face, grafts Eve's face onto her own, bleaches her hair, and puts on colored contacts to make the disguise even more convincing. The next day at university, Jess shares troubling news. Josh has disappeared, and the police are now searching for Angela as a prime suspect in his presumed death. Seeing investigators working the case makes Lynn nervous, and she quickly excuses herself. Later during class, Eve, who is actually Lynn in disguise, gives Paul a subtle signal that eventually leads him to invite her over. Her plan succeeds, but it comes at a cost, because getting close to Paul to search for the journal forces her through an encounter that leaves her feeling disgusted and humiliated. That night, overwhelmed with self-loathing, she takes her anger out on Eve's corpse, dismembering the body with a saw and even feeding one of Eve's severed hands to a pet dog. Meanwhile, Paul runs his own experiments using the extract from the rotting corpse flower, and to his excitement, the formula appears to work. A piece of pork he tests begins regenerating, suggesting he may have recreated the serum. When Lynn learns of Paul's success, she is furious that her father's research seems to be slipping further into his hands. Before long, Paul steps away to prepare some drinks while Lynn searches a hidden storage area for the journal. She does not find it, but she does discover the serum Paul has been developing. At that exact moment, the grafted skin on her face starts peeling. Afraid Paul will notice, she makes an excuse and leaves early, which strikes him as strange and leaves him suspicious. Back home, Lynn removes Eve's face. Just then, Jess unexpectedly arrives, surprised to find Lynn looking exhausted and disheveled. Jess only came to drop off some food from her mother and check on her friend. Then she opens the refrigerator, and what she finds inside horrifies her. Realizing her secret is exposed, Lynn immediately kills Jess before she can escape or tell anyone. Later that night, Paul grows worried about Eve's disappearance. Unable to reach her, he decides to visit Angela's house himself. When he arrives, he finds Lynn sitting alone, and it is instantly clear that something is very wrong. He starts asking about Eve, but instead of answering, Lynn unloads all of her anger, accusing him of stealing her father's research and taking credit for work that was never his. No longer caring about the consequences, she tells Paul to look inside the refrigerator. The sight is beyond horrifying. The woman he had been involved with has been reduced to body parts stored like pieces of meat. Before Paul can react, Lynn injects him with a tranquilizer and leaves him helpless. Sometime later, Paul wakes up completely at Lynn's mercy. As she begins cutting into his neck, the pain becomes unbearable, and driven by her hatred, she injects him with the regenerative serum in a reckless, uncontrolled way. Unfortunately for her, a neighbor notices what is happening. With her crimes finally exposed, Lynn has no choice but to run. Paul's fate mirrors Lou's years earlier. The serum spirals out of control, and new tissue grows over every opening in his face, sealing his mouth, eyes, and features shut. Lynn escapes as police begin closing in. Desperate, she flees into the subway system and finds John asleep nearby, begging him to help hide her. Then another disaster strikes. The serum she stole from Paul's house breaks open on John's lap, and both of them are exposed to the unstable formula. Their bodies begin mutating uncontrollably, eventually merging together into a single grotesque creature. Sometime later, Aunt Xiao's house has become a major crime scene surrounded by police tape, and investigators still cannot figure out where Lynn has gone. After returning from her trip and learning about the tragedy, Xiao desperately searches for her niece. At one point, she even follows a student who resembles Lynn, only to realize she has mistaken someone else for her. Then she finally sees the truth. Standing before her is the monstrous remains of Lynn fused together with John, the acid attack victim. The two have become one horrific creature, a final image far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. So the moral of the story is, if your skincare routine requires stealing faces, hiding bodies, and becoming a subway monster, maybe just try moisturizer instead.